The private reading of my father's will took place in the same mahogany-lined office where I'd spent countless evenings managing the Harrison family's complex financial empire. My stepmother Victoria sat perfectly poised in her designer mourning clothes, while her son Bradley lounged with the practiced indifference of someone who'd never worked for his money. I took my usual seat, the one I'd occupied for 7 years, as the family's private financial manager. The laptop in my bag contained enough secrets to destroy them all, but they'd never bothered to consider that. To them, I was just James Harrison's daughter from his first marriage. The quiet one, the reliable one, the one who helped with the books. "Before we begin," Victoria announced, smoothing her silk skirt, "I think Abigail should wait outside." Martin Walsh, Dad's longtime attorney, frowned. As James's daughter, she has every right. As his employee, Victoria cut in, she should respect the family's privacy during this sensitive moment. I met her eyes, remembering all the late nights I'd spent hiding her expensive shopping trips from Dad's scrutiny. All the creative accounting that kept her secret accounts growing while she played the dutiful wife. "I'll stay," I said quietly. Bradley snorted. "Did you miss the part about family privacy? Did you miss the part where I'm actually related to Dad by blood?" I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Unlike some people." Victoria's perfectly maintained smile tightened. "Now, dear, there's no need for unpleasantness. We all know James thought of Bradley as his own son." Yes, he did. Right up until the end, when the morphine made him confused enough to start talking about things he'd discovered. Things involving missing funds and duplicate accounts. Things that had made Victoria's visits to the hospital become suddenly more frequent and attentive. "Let's proceed," Martin said, opening a thick folder. The majority of James Harrison's estate, including the family business and primary residences, will be managed through the Harrison Family Trust. I noticed Victoria's slight relaxation. She'd gotten what she wanted. "The trust will be administered solely for the benefit of Victoria Harrison and Bradley Wells Harrison," Martin continued, his voice carrying a hint of disapproval, with Victoria serving as primary trustee. And there it was. 7 years of managing their finances, of protecting their secrets, of building their wealth, and I was being cut out completely. "There are some smaller personal bequests," Martin added. "Abigail will receive her mother's jewelry collection and a sum off." "We can handle the details later," Victoria interrupted. "I think we should discuss the transition of financial oversight. Abigail has been handling those duties, but obviously that arrangement will need to change." "Obviously, because you can't have the hired help knowing too much about the family finances, even if that hired help spent years building the very structures that protected their wealth." "Of course," I said, opening my laptop. "I'll prepare a complete transfer of all accounts I directly manage, though you might want to review certain arrangements first." Victoria's smile didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened. "Arrangements?" "The offshore accounts, for instance." I pulled up a spreadsheet. "I assume you'll want those handled with particular discretion." Bradley sat up straighter. "What offshore accounts?" "The ones your mother opened in 2019, I replied casually. "Starting with the Cayman Islands Foundation and expanding through various shell companies in Panama, Singapore, and Luxembourg." I glanced at Victoria. "Would you like me to continue?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. "Those accounts are confidential," she said, her voice tight. "They are," I agreed. "Very confidential, especially the transfers that began 3 months before Dad's cancer diagnosis." Martin shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No need. Victoria cut in quickly. Abigail is simply being thorough, as always. We can handle the transition details later. But I wasn't finished. Not after years of swallowing their condescension, of being treated like a servant in my own father's house. There's also the matter of the art collection, I continued, pulling up another file. The pieces purchased through the Gallery Romano Front Company. Interesting how their declared values for insurance differ from their reported values for tax purposes. Bradley's practiced indifference vanished. Mother? And of course, I added, the real estate holdings in your maiden name. The ones that somehow never made it into Dad's asset disclosures during his last refinancing. Victoria stood abruptly. That's enough. Martin, we'll continue this another time, without unnecessary personnel present. I closed my laptop slowly, deliberately. You know, Victoria, it's interesting that you never asked why Dad kept me managing the family finances all these years. Never wondered why he trusted his hired help with so much responsibility. Because you're good with numbers, she snapped. A useful skill for an employee. No, I corrected her. Because I inherited something more valuable than his money. I inherited his caution, his attention to detail, his understanding that true power isn't about having wealth, it's about knowing how to protect it. I stood, gathering my things. But you're right, the trust is for real family members. I'll begin transitioning the accounts tomorrow. Wait. Victoria's voice had lost its aristocratic certainty. Perhaps we should discuss this further. Why? I asked innocently. I wouldn't want to overstep my position as, what did you call it? Unnecessary personnel? Bradley was looking between his mother and me, finally beginning to understand that something was very wrong. The transition can wait, Victoria said quickly. We should take time to review everything properly. Oh, I agree. I headed for the door. In fact, I think we should review everything, every account, every transfer, every creative bit of accounting I've done over the years to keep certain activities private. Martin cleared his throat. Miss Harrison, if there are irregularities in the family accounts. There aren't, Victoria interrupted sharply. Abigail is simply being thorough. I paused at the door. You know what Dad told me in the hospital, right before he died. He said, the best leverage isn't what you take, it's what you know. Victoria's face went perfectly still. I'll see you tomorrow, I continued pleasantly. We can discuss the trust arrangements then, along with everything else. Walking out, I heard Bradley's confused voice. Mother, what exactly does she mean about the Cayman accounts? I smiled, thinking about the encrypted files on my laptop. About 7 years of documented transactions and creative financial arrangements. About all the secrets Victoria thought were safely hidden behind my hired help status. Dad had taught me well. True power isn't always about having your name on the trust. Sometimes it's about being the one person who knows where all the bodies are buried. And Victoria was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The Harrison family's private banking room at First Maritime Trust still felt like my domain. I'd spent years here, building the financial labyrinth that protected their wealth and their secrets. Now, watching Victoria and Bradley fidget in their expensive clothes, I savored the shift in power. As you can see, I explained, projecting a complex diagram onto the wall. The family's financial structure is intricate. Victoria's eyes darted between the dozens of connected entities, trusts, and offshore accounts. Her usual imperious expression had given way to barely concealed panic. "This is ridiculous," Bradley interrupted. "We don't need all these details. Just transfer everything to our new financial team." I smiled. Of course. Though they might have questions about certain transactions, like the $8 million that moved through 6 different shells before landing in your mother's private account in Singapore. Victoria's perfectly manicured hand tightened around her designer purse. That money was a gift from James. Really? I pulled up another document, because the transfer documents show it came from the company's environmental compliance budget. Right after Dad started asking questions about chemical disposal at the Milwaukee plant. Bradley's face went pale. "Mother, it's not what you think," Victoria said quickly. "James knew about all of this. He approved." "No," I cut in softly. "He didn't. That's why you increased his morphine doses whenever he started talking about the accounts. Isn't that right?" The banking room fell silent except for the soft hum of my laptop. Even Bradley looked shocked. My phone buzzed. A message from Diane at the SEC. "Documents received. Initial review confirms irregularities." "Shall we continue?" I asked pleasantly. "We haven't even gotten to the art collection yet. Those pieces you bought with company funds, but reported as charitable donations." Victoria stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. We'll have our lawyers." "Your lawyers might be interested in this too." I switched to another document. "The retainer payments from the family trust to firms that don't exist. 5 years of fake legal fees funneling into your private accounts. You helped set those up," she snapped. "You're implicated too." "Am I?" I opened a folder marked Insurance. Because I have 7 years of detailed memos to Dad documenting my concerns about these arrangements. Memos you intercepted and deleted from his email, but not, unfortunately, from my encrypted backups. Bradley slumped in his chair. "Jesus Christ, Mother." "Oh, don't act so innocent." Victoria turned on him. "Where do you think your gambling debts disappeared to? Those mysterious payments to your bookies in Vegas?" I pulled up another spreadsheet. Speaking of gambling debts, the casino payments were actually the simple part. The money laundering through the offshore sports betting sites was much more creative. Bradley's face went from pale to green. "You knew about that?" "I know everything," I said quietly. "Every transaction, every cover-up, every little financial maneuver you both thought was so cleverly hidden." Victoria's composure finally cracked. "What do you want?" "Want?" I feigned surprise. "I'm just being thorough in the transition. As an employee, I have a duty to ensure all accounts are properly disclosed." "Name your price," she hissed. "Half the trust?" "Fine. We can rewrite." "The trust?" I laughed. "You still think this is about money?" My phone buzzed again. "Diana, enforcement team ready when you give the word." "This," I continued, gesturing to the screen full of damning financial data, "is about 7 years of being treated like a servant in my own father's house. About watching you manipulate and steal from him, right up until his death." "We can fix this," Victoria said desperately. "Whatever you want." "What I want," I cut in, "is for you to understand exactly how badly you miscalculated. You thought I was just the hired help, the quiet daughter who was good with numbers. Never once wondering why Dad kept me so close to the family finances." I started shutting down my laptop. "In about an hour, the SEC will receive detailed documentation of every irregular transaction I've shown you today. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit already has copies." Victoria went very still. "You're bluffing." The same way you were bluffing about those environmental violations. Or about Dad's mental state when you hadn't changed his will. Bradley stood up so fast his chair toppled. You changed his will? Sit down, Victoria snapped. She's just trying to... To what? I asked. Tell the truth. Should we discuss the medical records you altered? The witnesses you paid off? The convenient timing of Dad's final morphine dose? The banking room's temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Even Victoria's perfect makeup couldn't hide her growing terror. You wouldn't, she whispered. You'll go down with us. All those transactions. You processed them. Under duress, I corrected. With detailed documentation of my protests. And with encrypted evidence of your threats when I tried to tell Dad the truth. My phone buzzed one final time. Diana, team's in position. Ready? I'll give you a choice, I said, standing. Option 1. You both resign as trustees immediately. A new independent trustee takes control with full audit authority. You live on modest stipends, far from any financial control. And option 2, Bradley asked weakly. I forward everything to the authorities. All of it. The fraud, the money laundering, the environmental cover-ups. I met Victoria's eyes. The medical records. Victoria's perfect facade finally shattered completely. You evil little. Careful, I warned. Remember who knows where all your bodies are buried. You planned this, she accused. All these years. You were planning this. No, I corrected her. I was just being thorough. Keeping detailed records, like any good employee should. I picked up my laptop. You have 1 hour to decide. Choose wisely. As I reached the door, Bradley called out, Did Dad know? About all of it? I turned back. He started figuring it out near the end. That's when Victoria increased his medication. But he did leave me one last message. What message? I smiled slightly. He said, The quiet ones see everything, and they never forget. Walking out of the bank, I thought about all the years of subtle humiliation. The constant reminders that I was just the help. The dismissal of my warnings about Victoria's schemes. They'd forgotten the first rule of power. Never underestimate the person who knows all your secrets. And now they had 1 hour to learn that lesson. Exactly 58 minutes after I left the bank, my phone rang. Martin Walsh's number. They've agreed, he said without preamble. Full resignation as trustees. But Victoria has conditions. I watched the sun setting over the city from my father's old office. Now my office. She's not in a position to make conditions. She wants immunity from any future investigations. And a guaranteed monthly stipend. Put me on speaker, I said, hearing shuffling as he complied. Victoria, I want you to understand something. You're not negotiating anymore. You're surviving. Her voice came through, stripped of its usual aristocratic polish. You vindictive little. The SEC teams are waiting. I cut in. One word from me, and they move on everything. The fraud, the money laundering, the medical records, silence. So here's how this works, I continued. You both resign. Immediately, the independent trustee I've chosen takes control. You live on the stipends we decide, in the properties we allow, and you never, ever attempt to access or influence the family finances again. And if we refuse, Bradley's voice shook slightly. I pressed a button on my phone. Diana, is the SEC team still in position? Ready on your signal, My longtime friend at the Securities and Exchange Commission replied. FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is standing by too. I let them absorb that. Your choice. But choose quickly. You have 90 seconds. The silence stretched for 45 agonizing seconds before Victoria spoke. We accept. Both of you? Yes, Bradley answered quickly. Both of us. Good. Martin, execute the papers. I've already had them drawn up. I paused, then added, and Victoria? Leave Dad's wedding ring. The one you took from the hospital before they called me. Her sharp intake of breath told me I'd been right about that too. 24 hours later, I sat in the main conference room of Harrison Industries, facing the board of directors. The same people who'd fawned over Victoria for years now sat in stunned silence as I laid out the changes. The company will undergo a full audit, I explained. Every transaction, every account, every decision of the past 7 years will be reviewed. But the publicity, one director began, is already handled. I finished. A press release goes out tomorrow announcing a voluntary corporate governance review. The markets will see it as responsible oversight, not desperation. Another director cleared his throat. And Victoria's position as chairwoman is terminated, effective immediately. I slid forward a thick folder, along with any board member who knowingly participated in her financial manipulations. I have documentation of who knew what and when. Choose your next moves carefully. 3 directors stood and left without a word. Smart ones. The others would learn soon enough. By evening, the reshaping of Harrison Industries was well underway. Bradley had been removed from his executive position. Victoria's loyalists were clearing out their offices, and Dad's old partners, the ones she'd forced out years ago, were already calling to discuss returning. I found Victoria waiting in my office as I finished the day's meetings. I have nothing left to say to you, I told her, moving to call security. Just one thing, she said, placing Dad's wedding ring on my desk. Why did you wait so long? You had this evidence for years. Why let us hang ourselves? I sat down, picking up the ring. Because Dad taught me that true justice isn't just about punishment. It's about giving people enough rope to reveal who they really are. She flinched. James never understood. He understood everything. I cut in. At the end, when the morphine doses weren't quite high enough to keep him confused, he asked me to protect his legacy, not just from you, but from what it had become. And now, a trace of her old derision crept back. You'll run everything? The quiet little bookkeeper becomes the queen. I smiled, remembering Dad's last lucid words. Actually, no. I'm appointing a professional management team, independent oversight, total transparency. Then what was the point? The point? I stood, fingering Dad's ring. The point was justice. For him. For the company he built. For every person you staked on climbing to the top. I met her eyes. And yes, for the hired help you never thought would matter. She turned to leave, then paused. The offshore accounts. The evidence. You really would have exposed everything. Check your phone, I replied. She did, and her face went ashen. Every major financial news site was running the story. Harrison Industries announces major governance reform. The subheading mentioned voluntary leadership changes and enhanced oversight measures. That version, I explained, lets you save face. The other version, the one with all the criminal details, is ready to go if you ever try to interfere again. You're more like me than you think, she said bitterly. No, I held up Dad's ring. I'm like him. I just learned to play your game better than you did. After she left, I sat in Dad's old chair, looking at the photos on his desk. Not the formal corporate ones Victoria had favored, but the real ones. Dad teaching me accounting at the kitchen table, us reviewing his first company's books together. The day I graduated with my finance degree. The quiet ones see everything, he'd always said, and they never forget. My phone buzzed. Diana from the SEC. Reforms look good. Prosecutors stand down. Yes, I replied, as long as they behave. Later that night, as I left the office, I passed Bradley clearing out his desk. He looked up, years of practiced arrogance replaced by something like understanding. He'd be proud of you, he said quietly. The way you protected everything. Not everything, I corrected him. Just what mattered. The truth. The legacy. The principle. And the money. I smiled. Money's just power, Bradley. The real victory is in knowing how to use it. The next morning, the business world awakened to a transformed Harrison Industries. Transparent. Ethical. Professional. Everything Dad had wanted it to be. Victoria and Bradley would live comfortably, but quietly, their stipends dependent on their continued good behavior. The offshore accounts were closed, their contents redirected to corporate philanthropy. The environmental violations were self-reported and corrected. And me? I kept Dad's old office, but mostly as a reminder. A reminder that true power isn't about having your name on a trust or your title on a door. It's about knowing when to be quiet, when to watch, and when to finally show your cards. Victoria had taught me that lesson, though not in the way she'd intended. She thought keeping me close but subordinate would ensure my loyalty. Instead, it had given me the perfect vantage point to document every mistake, every crime, every betrayal. Dad's ring now sat on my desk, next to a new photo, him and me at my college graduation, both of us smiling at some private joke. The quiet ones, watching and waiting. And in the end, that patience had revealed a truth Victoria never understood. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one holding the power. It's the one quietly documenting who's misusing it.